Hello, and welcome to our side-by-side virtual forum session covering the topic of hiring and leveraging administrative support to grow your business. My name is Sunny Magner, and I'm a business manager here at Side. And I'm thrilled to introduce three of our powerhouse partners that are on the panel and will be sharing their unique experiences with administrative support and how it has helped their businesses. We have Lamise Druby of the Druby team and founder of Generation Real Estate, Alex Wang, founder of Rainmaker Real Estate, and Mark Daya, founder of SAC Platinum Realty. Thank you all again for joining and for sharing your insight with us today. So to kick things off, I think it would be great if you could each start off by sharing what area you service, an overview of your current support setup, how long each of your team members have been with you, and how you originally found your support. So Lamise, do you want to kick things off?
Sure, yeah. So I am a realtor in San Francisco. I specialize in Noe Valley, which is a small neighborhood on the south side of the city. And I have two support staff women, Jennifer, who has been with me for 14 years, and Emily, who has been with me for 5.5. When I hired Jennifer, it was a long time ago. So we did post an ad in Craigslist, and Emily actually emailed my team and was looking for a position, and we interviewed her and filled a role that we didn't actually know we needed.
And Alex, what about you?
So Alex Wang, Rainmaker Real Estate. I'm located here in Los Altos, about 45 minutes south of where Lamise is, 45 minutes south of the city, focusing in Palo Alto, Los Altos, surrounding areas, and pretty much serving Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. For my assistance or support, I have got, well, it caught me in kind of a weird situation because I recently had an assistant of 10 years leave and a transaction coordinator of 3 years. But I do have a transaction coordinator who I work with off and on for about 8 years. He's independent. And I've got a project manager Lynn, who I've been working with for about 2 years, and she's a personal friend of mine. And then I do have hiring someone starting January 1st, the operations assistant. And that person is going to be helping me on the basically operations and ops within the office. And those are mainly the main support systems. And lastly, I have a VA or virtual assistant that I hired a few months ago, and that was to basically support some of the clerical administrative stuff. And I found her through a outsourcing company.
Awesome. We'll get back to more of that in a minute. But Mark, if you could give us a breakdown of your business as well.
I have a wonderful assistant. She's my director of operations, but she's really more than that. She's actually, I brought her on board initially to function more in the TC role than anything else. She's my transaction coordinator to begin with, but her responsibilities have increased and evolved over time. And now, actually, just on Wednesday, hired a VA through an outsourcing company as well to be her assistant. That way, it could free up her time to be spent more on more important matters for more team production-oriented stuff. And I also have an ISA who's trained to be, or who's studying to get his real estate license. So I've got that going on as well.
Excellent. And what area do you service as well?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sacramento. I'm a SAC Platinum Realty in Sacramento.
Thank you for giving that overview. So, I know for a lot of agents out there that are looking to build or grow their support teams, it's really hard for them to kind of envision how they want to set up that role and what responsibilities they want that person to take on and kind of day-to-day functionality. So how do you each have your admin support set up in terms of their day-to-day functionality, how they work with you and your systems? Lamise, do you want to start off with that?
Sure. I can, start by saying that we're trying to work on our systems still. We are a relatively, lean and mean team. So we are in kind of constant communication. We did work on job description so there was clarity between what Emily was doing versus what Jennifer was doing. We do have a, because of that, it's pretty, I guess, baked in. They have a pretty clear sense of what responsibilities they're taking are taking on. We communicate on a text thread constantly throughout the day, and we have a shared Drewby team email account that everyone is CC'd on most correspondence. I mean, they both have their own separate systems, frankly, that they have implemented to do their job in a more effective and constructive way. And so Jennifer definitely serves as the TC and does all the administrative, stuff at the office. And so she has used Evernote on occasion. We are using Copper for our client management. And then Emily we will send a weekly kind of lists of different action items that each person is going to be taking care of, if not daily at times.
Got it. So it sounds like there's constant communication going on through several different channels between your documentation and your text thread and email chains. And what about
Correct.
you, Alex? How do you have your team set up?
So each person's a little bit different. My virtual assistant, well, first off, we all communicate off of Slack. And so definitely trying to get communication off of email. I have too many emails. I'm sure you guys as well. And so removing that communication, moving it to Slack, or if it's text message or something like that, was definitely one of the first things. So we're all in Slack. My VA has access to my inbox, and so they're filtering and cleaning things up. I use an email system called the Front, and what Front does, it allows you to have multiple shared inboxes, and so I can go into someone's inbox and grab stuff that I need. So my transaction coordinator also has the same information, access to Front. And the project manager that works on prepping the properties works off of Asana to kind of get the checklist of, this needs to get done. And then the operations assistant role that I have come up is probably going to be a combination of all of the above. But ultimately, it's I think focusing on removing yourself from the email is key for me, and and us all communicating in one place.
Got it. And how did you initially get all that up and running? What was kind of the steps that you took to kind of build that system and put it in place?
Well, I mean, I've always been kind of a tinkerer of technology, and so even though I'm not an engineer, I have fun working with systems, and so to my detriment too, I think you guys should just pick one system and go with it. My team will be, oh great, there's Alex again with this new system that he wants to implement, and change management is extremely hard. But the baseline started off with just G Suite, right? The Google apps, and so we were all on that too. So it's just tinkering around, and if you don't know how to do it, I mean, YouTube, there's so many different things out there right now that walk you through it step by step.
Yeah. And one thing that I love about your team too, Alex, is I think you guys have really emphasized the importance of having a standard operating procedure and really documenting all of your processes as you go as well. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how your team has set that up?
Yeah. So I mean, I call it the crazy assistant cycle, in which you have an assistant, and then they get so busy, or then they decide to leave, and then you're too busy to train a new assistant, and so you just pick the first person that can fog a mirror in front of you, and then you get that person as your assistant, and then they're not trained well, and just a whole cluster of just not good stuff. And so I realized early on that if there's anything that anyone's going to be doing repeatedly more than once, that we should document it. And so part of the job of the operations assistant is to take my SOP or my standards of a procedure of how to do things and go through it and revise it and see if it's still up to date. And so that when the new person comes in, they're not working off of in a vacuum, and they also don't have to ask you for every single step of the way. There's actually a Bible that they can go to and say, okay, Alex wants this. Okay, he needs to follow these steps. And then if there's a problem, they can come back and ask me.
Awesome. I love that. And Mark, how do you have your system and your team set up?
Well, my assistant actually lives in Las Vegas, which is in the middle of COVID is perfectly fine, right? We could all work remotely, but that's how it started. She's been working with me since January. and it's been awesome. Haven't missed a beat being remote at all. We primarily communicate, well, obviously we talk a lot on the phone, but that even gets exhausting for me. But I primarily like to use the G Suite Hangouts. Just I message her through there, message back, whatever. It's pretty easy that way. Like you, Alex, it stays outside of the emails, which is probably the best thing, for us as well, so it doesn't get clogged up with stuff that you really don't need. But she does everything. Like I said in my intro, I mean, the trend, the impetus for me to be able to afford an assistant, I had to be able to say, okay, how am I going to justify this initially, right? Just getting started. And it was looking at the amount of money that I was paying in transaction management. And I said, okay, well, I could hire her to get that going. And then she's also going to have time left over. So maybe, half her day, 2/3 of her day might be more oriented towards that. But then the other part of it was helping me with my marketing, helping me with other projects and other long-term things that I've been thinking about. And we would just communicate regularly, through the G Suite, doing it that way. And then now she's really incorporating more into the team and talking to the team members as well, directly using that method as well. So I mean, I don't have Slack, I don't do any of that. It's just simple phone calls and Google Hangouts.
And how was it for you getting her up and running initially? Did you, have any sort of cadence, or was she kind of quick to get up and running? What was your experience?
Here's where
there?
I'm really lucky. The reason why she's my assistant is I chased her for a couple of years, honestly. I did a transaction, I think back in 2016, where the listings agent's phone number wasn't even an MLS. It just went to the office. I never once talked to the listing agent. I talked to her the whole time. And it was a flawless transaction. And I'm like, I got to get me one of these, right? Like, it was amazing. And I never forgot her. It was years since I even talked to her. And it was just out of the blue that I found a way to find her number, give her a call, and said, by the way, and so I got really lucky that way, where I didn't have to have standard operating procedures, checklists in place to train. She knew, and I was able to learn from her a little bit in the organizational sense, because that is definitely not my strong suit.
I love that story of how you found her. I've also seen a lot of people find success in just the interactions that they've had with people throughout transactions. They've made a lot of great connections that way as well. And are there any other resources that you guys have tapped into before to try to find administrative support that you might recommend to people that are looking out there?
Yeah, my suggestion is using WiseHire, because they also incorporate the disc profile into the application process, which I really like. You learn a little bit about their personality. It gives you some insight. It's obviously not the end all be all, but you can learn some extra information by following the disc profile on that.
Yeah, and I've heard of some good things with Pro REA staffing. They staff specifically real estate agents, assistants for real estate agents, and they conduct these interviews on YouTube. They conduct interviews on video, record to YouTube, and then send you the link of the video. And so you watch the interview of them first, which reduces the time. I'm always about saving time, right? It reduces the time of you trying to have the interview, and then you can select out of the three which ones. So I personally haven't staffed with them because I've had a pretty good network, but I have been in communication with them in the past, and they run a pretty good ship.
I love that. And as somebody is getting up and running and thinking about building out that support, what advice or recommendations would you provide to someone that is looking? Like, what would you say is the best place to start?
I mean, I think our other panelists might have a better advice in that way, since it's been a while since I've actually added to the team, and I am considering, and I'm appreciative of these actual two resources, because we are considering adding to our team one more person. So I do think it's interesting to really have clarity around what it is you're looking for, and personality types that are going to add and balance. I mean, I think part of the challenge, of course, for us and my team, is we have such an amazing dynamic and connection that adding in, there's some fear that could, make things off kilter. So we are being very deliberate about the, what role we're trying to fill. And we are actually trying to fill the role of maybe an assistant for the assistants. So it's going to be very, very important that Jennifer and Emily have a good relationship with them, so I think it's being relatively having a lot of thought around what it is you're looking for, and then going from there.
Yes, absolutely. That clarity on what you need help with is critical. And I think for a lot of people too, they think of a mixed bag of things that they need. They need the runner that goes out to the property and helps open the door. They need the person that's going to sit down and do the marketing orders. And so for a lot of people, they're looking for that unicorn. And sometimes we're lucky enough to find them, but other times you really have to be strategic about how you make those hiring decisions to make sure you're leveraging everybody's strengths accordingly. So I love that. Alex, what recommendations or advice do you have to share?
Yeah, I mean, you said a super good point, Sunny, is that there's different roles. And so not trying to find that one person for everything. I think the cliche is slow to hire is super important. Mark Grant mentioned about how he has a wise hire for disc profiles. And so I learned that from Nicole Solari on the last forum. She talked about how they use disc profiles. And so I ended up doing it. I've done like 7 or 8 of them now. And I actually this afternoon have a interview for another project manager. And I sent her disc profile as well as my own, so she knows what she's dealing with as well. And so we're going to have that conversation. I think that would be a good start. And yeah, just being, take your time and, figure out what the roles are, because I believe someone who's butt in the chair in front of a computer is different than someone that's out in the field. And so you have to be realistic that you can't get that one person that's going to do both. Otherwise, you're going to do both, averagely, and you really want to get them excel at each one of their roles.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you share your disc profile with her too, so she also knows what she's getting herself into. So we got to ask, is she still in conversations with you?
Yeah, she might cancel after reading the disc profile, right?
Yeah, let us know what you hear back.
Yeah.
Mark, what about you? What recommendations and advice or tips might you have for anyone looking to grow or build their support staff?
First thing is to really understand where your weaknesses are. And understand that there's certain, and when you're trying to fill that, there's going to be some people that they're great in certain roles, like going out in the field. You don't want that field person, just like Alex said, to be behind the desk. You want somebody who is great in support roles, that really thrives in that support role. Where I'll be the one that comes up with the idea, but I might not be always the greatest at executing it, right? And that's where I really am looking for somebody to take on the role. For me, that's my weakness, right? So, when I'm interviewing somebody and I'm trying to fill that role and find that position, it's definitely somebody that makes up for what I lack. And that's where we team up really well. And now that position is growing itself, because initially she was part of a transaction coordinator / marketing / so on, right? I want to move her away from the transaction coordinating, so I just open up my credit card and say, "Here you go hire somebody." And that's where she's getting her own VA to take care of more of the transaction management work, while she works on things that are far more dollar productive activities from my perspective, that she's going to be taking on and handing off the less dollar productive activities to somebody else. And it's all about how you start it and how you grow it. It just really dependent on what those needs are, and really being smart about identifying those needs and that person that could actually fill that skill set that you need.
Yeah, if I could add on to that, Mark said about how dollar productive activities, and so there's big dollar activities and there's small dollar activities, right? And so early on, I had a trainer to tell me that if you don't have an assistant, then you are the assistant.
You are one.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I would encourage the agents that are looking to find an assistant that think about what is the most important dollar activities that for their business, and that's the stuff that they should be doing. And all the other stuff, shouldn't be doing. And there's going to be take a step of faith to go out there to hire that assistant. I also hear that some agents say, "Hey, do you want to share an assistant?" Because they don't want to spend the full salary to share an assistant. And Lamise is shaking her head, and so is Mark, because we know that anything with two heads is a monster, and you can't answer two bosses, and so it's just not a good idea. And so, yeah, just two things that came to mind when Mark mentioned about the dollar productive activities.
I baby stepped into it, right? It was this slash rule, right? Because I was already spending the money anyway, so just a little bit more gets me an assistant. That's how I looked at it. And now I'm like, okay, no. We're getting somebody completely different for that role, and now you're going to be this. So I grew, right? And I think if you don't have one yet, start that way at least.
And I think you both touched on great points. I know, Mark, you kind of said that, you have your person, your contact really involved in your business. So she feels like she's really owning part of that business with you. And so what do you all do to help avoid, team burnout or really making your team really feel like they are part of that growth of that business?
I can start there. I mean, I do think having some incentives per transaction is helpful, just in terms of financial rewards for the growth of the business. I also think when you are respectful of your team's time and understand, when they're working too hard and how you honor that and give them time off. I mean, for example, every year I close my office for 2 weeks and everyone gets a full, break at the same time. It's not easy. I don't think the clients love it, but there are just times of year where everyone needs to know they can take a break. And I mean, I think for the sake of our team, they see I work really hard as well. And I'm doing things that maybe is beneath my, place in the team structure. Because it really does feel like it equalizes everyone's role. And I try not to be too precious about, my place in the team. And I think that creates an environment where they're willing and interested in working harder. And being, we're now into the second decade with one of my assistants, and I assume it will work that way with Emily too.
Yeah, for me, I think, I have to admit, I'm not the best at not burning out. I have a long wick on my candle, but apparently my support staff doesn't have as long of a wick sometimes. And so checking in with them on a weekly basis on Tuesdays, we have a really quick 45-minute stand up to check in, see how everyone's doing. But I do have to be more intentional in checking with them on a one-on-one basis as well. I'm happy to celebrate and spend time and money to kind of celebrate the wins that we have, but quite often I get stuck just moving on to the next deal, and so I'd say that's probably where I can definitely improve.
Yeah, it's for me, it's my assistant is such an integral part of my business. I can't do it without her. And where I have all my major decisions, I'm running them past her. She has ownership really in the business in terms of the decision-making process, right? It really, from her perspective, she is such an integral part of it, and she feels it, she knows it, right? And but there's a certain sense of pride that goes along with that, and she treats my business like it's her own business. And I could definitely say that because I'm getting emails from her like at 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop it. But it's I'm really lucky that way, I guess. But I just, there's this mutual trust, I guess, that we've bonded over, and I think that is it just comes across as we both have a vested stake in the success, and what Lamise says about having financial incentives, that goes along with it too.
So Alex, you mentioned that you have a project manager on your team. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that role entails and what they're doing for you?
Sure. So it's primarily on the listing side. When you're representing sellers and you're selling at high volume, there's a lot of work that needs to get done to get the property from where its current state to where it's ready to market. and there's so many different steps of the process that if you have more than a handful of listings, it's hard to kind of keep track of all those. And so I have a project manager, and her name is Lynn, and her capacity, what we found, is about 6 to 8 listings at one time, where before she starts saying, Alex, I'm going crazy. But she's the one that basically does the scheduling, meets the vendors, gets the estimates. I get the estimates, provide them to the sellers for approval. But then when we're managing the whole quarterbacking that whole process of bringing the property to market, and so from beginning to end, everything from that to even just scheduling, getting the super box on as well. So it could be a little bit of a field coordinator kind of role as well. This person is out in the field going from property to property to property, but they have a good relationship because we use quite often the same vendors. So that relationship is really key to be able to communicate with the vendors. Vendors know my expectation, and then obviously they know ours as well. And so it's a good fit.
Very much so. And actually, that is a role that Emily, who is my director of operations, takes on as well. And it's overwhelming, honestly. So that is a place where we could probably add to our team, because that front end of the listing prep is, can be months at a time for us to kind of get the house up and running.
Does she interact with the sellers?
She does. I mean, I'm mostly the point person for the sellers, and she serves as support. But definitely there is communication between her and the sellers. And I add that to my morning run, where I run from one listing to the next to just see how the projects are progressing. So I try to stay within a 4-mile radius or so.
I love that.
Well, that's why I thought this was a great panel, because you guys all have, different markets, different team setups, different situations going on with each of your teams too. So I feel like between all of you, we get a really good glimpse of different resources, different setups, different systems to use. So this was great.
Yeah, well, I guess those higher price listings like you have in the Bay Area just require higher touch. And as a result, you're hiring more to create the higher touch, which is what you need, and that's where the commission goes. That's what it pays for. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like more prep work up front for some of those higher price homes too, or perhaps in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the expectation of the buyer is definitely going to be different over there, right?
Yeah, and we also, as you said, have older inventory. Majority of our houses weren't built in 2005.
So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
Nice
thank you.